Well, I began that work in 1989. Of course, that was the year of decisive transition. And I had one basic expectation, which I think was fulfilled, and that was that the artificial divide of Europe would end, and that the countries of Central Europe and of Eastern Europe would become normal parts of a European-wide economy. So my basic idea was not so strange, and that was that the Iron Curtain, as it was called in the United States, had descended across Central Europe after 1945, and it was being lifted. And the barriers and the two systems that had evolved after 1945, the Soviet system and the European community system, would become one unified region. And I said, as an economic point, that would enable a catching up of Central and Eastern Europe towards the living standards of Western Europe, and that would happen over time, and that institutionally there would be a kind of convergence or unification of institutions, mostly the Central and Eastern European countries becoming like the Western European countries. And that was formalized in that acquis communautaire of the European community, which then became the European Union, that the countries of the former Soviet area would adopt the laws, standards, conventions, and so forth of the European community at the time. So that's what I argued for. That's what I recommended. And I think, broadly speaking, it came to pass. The one thing that did not come to pass was that I believed in what Mikhail Gorbachev was saying at the end of the 1980s, which is that this common European space should extend to Russia and should extend to the former Soviet Union. And indeed, that there should be a common home between Rotterdam and Vladivostok, as Gorbachev put it. Of course, that not only did not happen, we're in the middle of a war, which is the contradiction of that. And so the early period and today are very much related. I believe then, I still believe today, that there should be peace and normal relations across the large expanse of Western Europe, Central Europe, Eastern Europe, and the former Soviet Union. And this is what I still don't give up on, even though this is not the vision of the United States or of the European Union right now.
You are primarily a professor of economy. And if you have a look on the actual situation of the economies in the Czech Republic, Slovak Republic, Poland, Hungary, and so on, you may agree with me that the results of that transformation are not identical with the initial plans. What is your opinion upon this issue?
Well, I just looked at the data again to see where things stand. And a good source is the International Monetary Fund data, which is systematic and available and comparative. So one can look at the world economic outlook. If you look back to the late 1980s, for example, in Poland, where the data exists basically from the 1980s onward, Poland's per capita income or per capita output was about 1/3 of Germany's level at the end of the 1980s. Now it's about 70%. So there's been a very substantial narrowing of the gap of income. The Czech Republic was always richer, than Poland, and that was true from the 1920s onward. Czechoslovakia was a quite industrialized, high technology economy pre-World War II. But also, of course, the data are not easy to get exactly because of the division of Czechoslovakia. But let's just say, starting in 1995, according to the IMF data, the Czech Republic was about 50% of the German level per capita. Now it's about 70-some percent, 75% or so. So there's been a convergence of income levels, not complete, but convergence. And this is true pretty much across the board. Romania really caught up a lot. Slovakia really caught up a lot. It's important to remember, and I'm sure everybody does, of the right age like us, that in the 1980s, the Central European countries were far behind technologically and in living standards of Western Europe. And in some cases, especially in Poland, were in a catastrophic mess, actually, huge debt crisis.
That's true.
And so forth. So I think what we've seen is a lot of convergence. Of course, Prague is, a touristic boom city of the world, but it's not completely even convergence. There's a general principle that the closer one is to the German economy during the period after 1989, the higher the living standards and the faster convergence, generally because the German industrial base up until recently has been the main motor of growth of Europe as a whole. And that's been true of Central Europe and Eastern Europe, a lot related, of course, to the German automotive industry. Now there's more of a crisis, so it's the situation is not so good, and it's related also to the war in Ukraine, which has really broken a lot of economic relations, and that's, I'd say, hurting Europe generally. But if you look over the long period, the thing that I wrote about in the late 1980s and early 1990s was two ideas. One was there should be normal economy, and what that would mean is that Central and Eastern Europe institutionally would look a lot more like Western Europe, because the Eastern and Central European Soviet system was a failure, and it was going to be overhauled in the direction of the institutions of Western Europe. Second, there would be a convergence of income levels. And both are true. The convergence has been substantial but incomplete, and again, very much dependent on geography. The further east, the less the convergence in general.
Here we can have a long debate, and I can quote other, let's say, figures. I don't know whether you know that, for instance, Czech Republic reached the level of GDP from the end of the 80s only in the year 2004, which is obviously not a success. And at the same time, Czechoslovakia and even the Czech parts of the Austro-Hungarian Empire since, say, last decades of the 19th century were regarded as an industrial heart of the monarchy. And since that time till the 80s, we developed as a country, let's say, as a sort of a sovereign actor in the Champions League, let's say, of international, global industrial markets. We were, let's say, exporting dozens of very advanced technologies, investment, let's say, complexes, leaders in many, let's say, industrial fields, which is not the case let's say at the moment. While we are, for instance, through the cars like Skoda, Volkswagen, we are successful. But most of the let's say fields and companies and so on, which were independent and sovereign in the international markets and generating a lot of, let's say, good incomes for the whole of the country, they are in the foreign hands. It does not. It's not, let's say, owned by Czechs, be it the state, be it the private, let's say, companies, private owners, and we feel repercussions of all of this. I don't know whether you had a chance to study that part of the picture of today.
I haven't. I don't know the Czech situation in detail. I advised Poland, much more intensively. Mm-hmm. In Poland, I don't think there's any doubt that living standards substantially increased. Poland, of course, was not Czechoslovakia, and it was very different back in the 1910s and 1920s. It was much more rural, much more peasant, much less advanced industrial. So I can't really say categorically. I think it's true. I believe it's the case that in the Czech Republic, living standards have increased. Convergence with living standards in Austria or Germany have occurred, not completely, but substantially. But I think what is also true is that at the advanced levels of an economy like Czech Republic, a lot depends, like you say, on innovation, on the quality of higher education, on new startup businesses and so forth. I'm not enough familiar with the scene to really give you any sophisticated rendition of that. All I would say is certainly the potential for that is much higher now than it was in 1990. Whether the government's policies are adequate to promote that kind of innovation-led development is, really a national question as well as a European-wide question.
Maybe we can agree upon the other element or pillar of all of this. We are much less independent, and we are, let's say, milked to this or that extent by foreign capital. And it has not only economic and social repercussions, but also it has to do something with the capability of the country of a sovereign development. There is, infrastructure and all of this. There is a big internal debt in this respect. Would you have a recommendation how to withstand better the power play of the big sharks from abroad?
I think, again, being part of a larger world economy is inevitable. Because no country can do anything on its own. I think the big mistake that Europe is making, the overwhelming mistake that Europe is making right now, is the war with Russia, the breaking of relations with Russia, the complete subservience to U.S. policy, which I find absurd. And very, very bad for Europe. And at a national level, no doubt the quality of higher education and the scientific community is essential. Why was Czech Republic or Czechoslovakia more productive a century ago relative to its neighbors? Because it was a very innovative, technologically sophisticated society, very strong education. Charles University played a deep historic role in the country. Engineering was at a very advanced level. And that's the key. That's what's needed anywhere.
This was the core of my question to you. How to come back to that much more successful, let's say, trajectory of development based on our own scientific and educational and other resources, which traditionally were very strong. I mean, and now somehow it's not the case so much.
Well, I do. Yeah, no. I do think absolutely. You look at even tiny countries like Singapore, which has a much higher living standard than the Czech Republic right now.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Lee Kuan Yew, who led the country, was absolutely convinced already from the 1960s onward, be at the top of the education game, establish national universities, advanced science and technology programs, be at the cutting edge. And this is what I expect of the Czech Republic, actually, because that's the tradition. I expect Charles University to be one of the world's leading universities. It should be, and this should be the focus of the government. It should be the focus of the development strategy, a knowledge-led, science-led development. And by the way, you always had strong neighbors. The Hungarians produced lots of great sicentists, some of the greatest. I mean, they became American Hungarian scientists that invented the computer age, like von Neumann. This tradition needs to be reestablished. Absolutely. Tourism is nice, but it's not going to produce that kind of economy. The kind of economy that people want is produced with innovation, technology, and a major effort in that direction. I thought the Visegrad countries would do that, actually, because Poland also has its scientific traditions. It was a leader in mathematical areas a century ago. And there are a lot of universities and institutions that could team up for this kind of innovative area. It's not good enough to rely on being a supplier to German industry. And by the way, it's even worse now because German industry is in crisis. And so this is leading to a more general crisis in Central Europe. This is why this whole U.S. NATO-led approach is wrong.
Exactly. Let me turn the page a little bit. I don't know whether you will agree or not, but I think that till the end of the 80s, both Europe and the entire globe somehow were more safe than they are today. What's your opinion upon the chance to create a needed security architecture, guaranteeing equal and indivisible security to all powers, and not only, obviously, to all countries? Can it be designed and introduced?
Of course. In fact, it exists, although it's almost dead, and that's the OSCE, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, had exactly the right idea. First, collective security. Second, security that included not just Western, Central, and Eastern Europe, but the full European region, including the former Soviet area. Third, collective security, because it's a core principle of OSCE that no country can aim for security at the expense of any other. This is completely different from the U.S. mentality. The U.S. mentality is us versus them. We are the good guys, they're the enemies, and we need to expand our bloc. And of course, this goes back to the same period we were discussing, 1989 and 90. The reason I got involved was I liked what Gorbachev was saying, which was let's end the Cold War and make a common European space. And of course, when the Berlin Wall fell in November 1989, and Kohl wanted to reunify Germany, Gorbachev said, "Okay, we'll support that. We'll end the Cold War. We'll even end the Warsaw Pact military, but don't take advantage of this." And two of the leading foreign ministers of the time, our Secretary of State, James Baker III, and German Foreign Minister Hans-Dietrich Genscher, promised explicitly to Gorbachev repeatedly, not in vague terms, but repeatedly, NATO will not move 1 inch eastward as a result of this. We will not take advantage of the Soviet Union. And when Yeltsin came to power, Clinton said the same thing. Now, it turned out it was a lie of the Americans, because already by 1992, the Americans were promoting NATO expansion secretly. By the mid-1990s, Clinton signed off on NATO enlargement. The Czech Republic was one of the first three, Poland, Hungary, and the Czech Republic in 1999. But it didn't end there, because the U.S. strategy was to continue to expand NATO, not only to Central Europe, which Russia was not happy about, but was not profoundly unhappy, because the Czech Republic does not border Russia. And this was not a deep security issue, but it was a lie, and it was a cheat. But then in 2004, Bush Jr. expanded NATO to 7 more countries. And this time it was the 3 Baltic states, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. It was 2 countries on the Black Sea, Bulgaria and Romania. And it was 2 Balkans countries. It was Slovakia and Slovenia, actually. So that was 2004. Then Gorbachev said in 2007, stop, no more. And,
Putin, you said Gorbachev. Putin said it.
I'm sorry, Putin. Excuse me. Yes. Thank you for correcting me. But Putin was just channeling Gorbachev. Gorbachev had said the same thing. So Putin said at the Munich Security Conference, "You cheated, you lied, you told us no expansion. Stop now." Now, George W. Bush Jr. was not the brightest president we ever had, and his vice president was really absolutely one of the worst politicians we ever had in the United States, Dick Cheney. And they decided in 2008 to expand NATO to include Ukraine and Georgia. This is an old idea. It actually goes back to Palmerston in Britain in the 1850s. Surround Russia in the Black Sea. Exactly. And Brzezinski had the same idea in the 1990s. So they decided to play out this scenario. This is the U.S. security state. We can trounce Russia. Russia's a second-rate country. Maybe it will even break apart, because that was also part of the deep state plan, that since the Soviet Union had disintegrated, well, Russia would also disintegrate. And they even talked openly, these politicians in Washington, about a European Russia, Siberian Russia, and Far Eastern Russia as 3 separate entities. Well, I don't think the Russians like this very much. This was taken as a direct threat to Russian security. And at the same time, the United States abandoned the anti-ballistic missile treaty in 2002, and it started to place Aegis anti-ballistic missiles in Poland and Romania starting in 2010. And Russia said, look, that's a few minutes from Moscow. What the hell are you doing? You're directly threatening us. NATO enlargement, missile placements. This is supposed to be the end of the Cold War. It's the opposite. And then in 2014, the United States worked with really right-wing Ukrainian paramilitaries to overthrow the Ukrainian government in February 2014. So this was a coup in broad daylight that the United States actively abetted and supported. And for Russia, this is just completely a threat to Russian security. So we laugh at Russia. Oh, we're peace loving. Well, the United States isn't peace loving, it's power loving. And the United States wanted to expand NATO. It overthrows governments. It expands its military placements. This is NATO. NATO is not an alliance. NATO is a U.S.-led military operation. And Russia said no. So the war started with Ukraine 10 years ago, and it's been escalating since then. And it's extremely dangerous.